This is from the SAT number 9. This is from April 2017. And the question says the passage is primarily concerned with something. So this is the first question out of the gate for this passage here. And typically these types of questions are a little more general. They're asking sort of about the big picture. And this is asking basically what is the point of the passage? What is it that the passage is focused on? What is it concerned with? So to solve this, we kind of need two things. So one, we need a general comprehension of the text. And so we might be able to solve this question just from memory, depending on how well we understand or understood the passage. And it's always good to sort of get that foundation. And you can look at my other video discussing the passage to sort of get a sense of how I understand it and the way I break it down, the things I pay attention to for that. The second thing that we can do, though, and which we should still do, even if we feel like pretty confident in our understanding of the passage and what we remember about it, is we should go back and look for specific evidence within the passage to sort of answer and support our choice. So I always do this, and I usually feel pretty confident that I understand what the passage is about. But I still, my first thing that I do when I encounter a question like this is I'll go back to a few key places before I answer this. And when we're talking about the overall picture of the passage, the first places that I'm going to look are this little subtitle here, which talks about, it gives you the actual title of the article. Sometimes it tells you a little bit more. Sometimes the title is pretty informative because it's very descriptive of what the essay is about, and sometimes some of the rest of the information will help guide us. The second thing I'll do is I'll look at the introduction, because the SAT is pretty good, especially on scientific and historical passages. They're pretty good at giving the thesis on the front end. I used to say look at the conclusion as well, but I've come to realize that usually the conclusion doesn't recap or give a good summary. Sometimes what it'll do is just point towards the future, point towards a new study, especially on science passages, a new study that needs to be done, or new debates, or new questions, or new criticisms. It doesn't really do a good job of summarizing the rest of the passage. So just focus on this blurb up here and the introduction. So this blurb says a tangled tale of plant evolution. And we should at least know that the topic of this passage is lignin, right? Which is this strengthening and stiffening polymer common in woody plant cells. And we should at least know it's about that. So a tangled tale of plant evolution. We can kind of put two and two together and talk about, maybe this is talking about lignin and the role that it plays in plant evolution. And that's pretty much true, although it's not specific enough for us to answer this question. So we should continue to look at the introduction. So this paragraph here basically says, as ancestors of land plants abandoned their aquatic nurseries, they needed the means to seal in water and hold themselves thrive. Lignin is the strengthening and stiffening polymer that allowed them to do this. So all this is doing really is introducing what lignin is about. But I still feel like we haven't gotten to the point of the passage yet. So in this case, I'm actually going to keep reading past the first paragraph, and I'm going to keep reading towards the second paragraph. So lignin production for those tasks was considered a key adaptive advantage, and then we get this. Now, a University of British Columbia botanist and some highly specialized chemists have strong evidence for lignin in a red alga called, I'm not going to even try to pronounce it, called this thing here. So a very common structure for SAT science passages is it starts with sort of this general introduction about it's long been known that this, or it's long been thought that this, or this and that, or here's this term, or here's this phenomenon in nature, and then it's going to begin with but now, or a recent study, and then it's going to lead into toward talking about a new study that sort of expands or takes a new direction on this general topic. And that's what we have here. We're introduced to lignin in general, what its function is. Then the next thing is we're introduced to this new study. And it shows that strong evidence for lignin in a red alga. And we might read a little bit more to understand sort of why that's significant. And that tells us right here. This finding suggests that a biological building block, lignin, has roots that stretch back far deeper and may be wider through evolutionary time than was known. So we've had to do a little more reading than is common. We're already in the third paragraph here. But still, we haven't read too much, and I think we can be pretty confident taking the title of the passage, plus the introduction, plus this little claim here in the third paragraph, to say that the point of this passage is to look at lignin, look at the evolution of lignin, and to kind of consider this study that says the evolutionary roots are actually a lot deeper than was previously thought. So if we look at the answer choices, we start with A, which says that the passage is concerned with narrating how a finding was arrived at and indicating possible implications. So maybe this is true, maybe this is something we want to keep to continue to figure out, because the passage does go on to talk about the experience of finding lignin and maybe some implications. So maybe we can keep it and see if it's right if we don't find stronger answer choices. B says that the passage is concerned with explaining some differences among specialists in different fields of science. And that's not really the approach that the passage takes. So what this would mean is basically the passage is mediating between these different ideas or these different methods among specialists. So this plant chemist thinks this or this botanist thinks that, but it only takes the perspective of a single study. So for that reason, B is not going to be a good answer choice. C says that the passage is concerned with identifying a vexing phenomenon and endorsing a single explanation. So one thing that we should note here is the strong language, again, something we should be averse to. This says particularly vexing phenomenon. Vexing is a very strong word, and then we're qualifying it by saying it's particularly vexing. And then here, endorsing a single explanation, which is very absolute. So for these reasons, I'm skeptical of this. The way that they're describing lignin is a very neutral terms, very easy terms. They're not talking about it being vexing. And I'd be surprised if there's any phenomenon on the SAT that's described as being vexing and that they're going to offer this single explanation, no qualifications. So for that reason, C is not a good answer choice. D says that the passage is concerned with describing the properties of an organism and showing how they can be exploited. So this would mean that they're looking specifically at some kind of organism. In this case, it would have to be lignin because we know that's the focus. And then showing how they can be exploited. This would mean maybe basically what we can get from lignin in terms of its market value, maybe sourced some sort of chemical, or maybe some sort of productive use of it, some sort of technological use of it, whatever. And that's not really what happens. And we can do that sort of by scanning back through the text, or just by going by memory to notice, hey, do they talk about any sort of commercial uses for lignin? And we should find that they don't really. So for that reason, we can get rid of D, which is going to leave us with answer choice A, which is going to be narrating how a finding was arrived at, and then indicating some possible implications. And the possible implications are going to be basically that the evolutionary pathway, or what was commonly understood to be the evolutionary route or pathway of lignin, is actually, the evolutionary history extends a lot farther back than was originally thought. So for that reason, we'll choose answer choice A for question 43.